We have 5 Psycho films, so let's rank them. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a good one today. I'm the Movie Ranker, and today I'm going to be ranking all 5 Psycho movies from worst to best. Now, while I find a lot of people praise certain films in this franchise, I feel like the franchise itself is kind of underappreciated. It's fairly solid for the most part, but we're going to get into that. But first, make sure you drop your rankings of this franchise down in the comment section, and let's dive right in. So coming in the last place at number 5, I got Psycho from 1998, the remake. Now, this is one of the most pointless remakes I've ever seen in my life. It's literally shot for shot the same movie as the 1960 version, just in color and updated to be in the 90s. But like even the camera angles, the cinematography, everything looks the exact same. And it's like, but why? Why would I want to watch this version when we already have the same movie available? And by doing a clone of another movie, it lacks all the mystery because you already know what's going to play out, how it's going to play out. There's no twists or turns that tries to divert from the original. It stays right on course from beginning to end. We do get a great cast. I mean, I love Viggo Mortensen, William H. Macy from Shameless, who usually plays Frank. They're all great actors, but none of them really elevate the movie any farther than before or outdo the previous actresses or actors, aside from maybe Julianne Moore. I actually really like her version of Marion Crane's sister. But the big problem here is Vince Vaughn. He is terribly miscasted as Norman Bates. I don't know if you could get anybody as good as Anthony Perkins in the role, so he was kind of already at a loss. But the little bit of new stuff that he brings to the role, I do not enjoy. Like, every time he gives a line, he kind of giggles, like, and it's like, he already comes off as creepy and as someone you shouldn't really trust right away. Where in the original, you weren't sure how to take Norman Bates. He was a little bit more innocent and he had like a childlike innocence to him. I don't know how else to explain it, but he didn't really feel like a villain, you know? In this one, right away, you're like, something's off about this guy, and yeah, that kind of also takes away from the mystery. One positive I will give is the poster, though. I always loved the poster of this. I remember seeing it when it came out, never really knew what Psycho was at the time, at the video rental stores, and always thinking, that looks pretty creepy, that poster. But aside from that, you may enjoy this. If you do enjoy this, more power to you. I can see if someone's seen this one first and has some nostalgia or attachment to it, maybe from their childhood watching it, and preferring this version. Yes, that makes sense. You've seen this one first. But I can't see anybody who watched the original and would prefer this one after watching the original. It just doesn't make sense to me unless you just hate older films and just are not into that style. But yeah, this one's dead last, and it's easy one in my book. Up next, at number 4, I got Psycho 4, The Beginning. Now, this one, I do like that it has a different story structure than the other films. It doesn't just copy what Part 3 did. It does its own thing by having Norman calling a radio show and explaining a little bit of his childhood, and we get flashback scenes in that. For the most part, it's like a prequel because of all the memories he's telling, right? And you know, the problem with prequels is it lacks mystery and you already know the outcome. So I'm not a big fan of all the flashback scenes in that, even though Olivia Hussey plays his mom and she does a fantastic job. Her performance really saves that part of the movie for me. You can really see how she abused and manipulated Norman, you know, really getting his emotions all mixed and just having a really bonkers childhood. She was a terrible mother, but like I said, Olivia Hussey plays it so well. Some very bizarre stuff in here, like borderline incest stuff, and you know, making him dress up like a girl and all this. But at the same time, I would actually prefer not to know his past. You know, I like for us to leave it more ambiguous, for us to kind of think about it on our own, use our imagination of what happened before the first film. You know, but yeah, another thing that bugged me is almost positive either in the original or the sequel, the part two, they mentioned that Norma, the mom of Norman, how she acquired the motel because she met this guy with a lot of money, and they became engaged, and he convinced her to get rid of her farmland and open up this motel. But in this film, they already own the motel before she meets that douchebag who eventually Norman gets rid of with his mother. Uh, like I said, it's just kind of unfortunate with these prequels, even especially when they screw up some of the continuity. But the part that's most intriguing about this film is the stuff that's happening in present time. We learn through his conversation with the radio show that he's married to his psychiatrist, I believe, and or a nurse of some sorts, and they're about to have a kid, and he's starting to lose it, thinking, what if my kid grows up just like me? And he kind of starts to snap, and he wants to go and not have the baby. So he's basically wants to kill his wife, and he sees it as the only way out, the only way to save the future, basically. And all that's super interesting. And I like how it closes off the Norman story too, how he ends up burning down the house and said he's finally moving on and all that. And he gets kind of a happy ending here. And I really would have wished we would have gotten a sequel to this in the future, showing his son and how he's on like a borderline insanity, and that would just be really interesting if they had a really good script to go along with it. And it's something that could be made today because his son would be in his early 30s by now, right? And that's a really interesting concept to me. But this movie overall is just okay. It suffers from lack of mystery, I suppose. Coming in at number 3, I got Psycho 3. Now, this one was actually directed by Anthony Perkins himself, and I think he does a pretty damn good job, if you ask me. And I like how he did a tribute to Hitchcock and a few of the camera angles and shots that he did as well. This one's much more straightforward, though. It's basically just like an 80s slasher. It obviously doesn't have mystery behind Norman himself, because we see that he is back to his old ways, dressing up as his mother and taking out people coming to the motel. So that is a little bit more straightforward and basic, but the mystery here is, what is he going to do to some of the guests that arrive, that get involved with his life, like the Duke. He starts running the motel, and we see right from the start that there's something off about him. He's a really weird character and just kind of creepy in his own ways. Right from the start, when he picks up the hitchhiker, the girl left the nun hood, and he's acting really weird towards her. And then eventually, when he runs into Norman and her again at the motel, you're like, something's bound to happen, and it does. And yeah, he's a real interesting character, the Duke. How he blackmails Norman, saying his mom's still alive, and has her in one of the cabins, and he's like using her basically as blackmail. I'm saying, I found the corpse of your mom, and I could send you back at any time, so do as I say. You better give me money. And it's all super interesting, and you got great shots in there of the red lighting when he's in that room acting all weird and half naked there. And of course, the girl leaves the nun hood, Maureen Coyle, I believe her name is. It's real interesting that she has the same initials as Marion Crane, and that kind of screws up Norman, and he keeps connecting the two, Marion and her, and it probably won't end well, but it's still interesting to see how the relationship plays out, and how she believes she could save Norman with religion, and she feels like she found a purpose with her nunhood or whatever. All that is this really interesting, and you really need that in a film like this that goes much more straightforward with the Norman character. And the whole investigation surrounding Miss Spool and finding out if Norman killed her in the last movie and all this is real great too. You got the cops and the sheriff and that kind of on his side. They're like, leave Norman alone. He's a good guy. He done his time. And at the very end, when he gets caught, they're like, you disappoint me, Norman. And it's just so funny. But yeah, a really decent follow-up to part 2. I feel like on rewatch, this one went up a little bit with my rating, because the first time I watched it, I thought it was pretty mediocre, but I really enjoyed it this time around. Now, reaching our top 2, this was really tough for me. Both very excellent films. I could see people rank part 2 as number 1 or rank the original as number 1, but after this recent rewatch, I had to choose Psycho 2 as my number 2. At times, this is my number 1 Psycho movie. It's that close. But yeah, just such a great movie. A sequel to a 1960 film, and it feels like it connects really well. And this came out in the 80s, like 20 some years after. And they did such a good job continuing that story in a way that still builds on mystery. Norman is such an interesting character. So tackling him in a different decade and just seeing him as a good guy this time around, he's very sympathetic. You're definitely rooting for him, which is not something you would think could happen after watching the original, but they just do such a good job with the script. This one was directed by Tom Holland, I believe, the guy who directed Child's Play and all those great films, and Fright Night. He does a great job in the director's chair here. And like I said earlier, this sequel just blends right in with all the other 80s slashers so well, but it has more brains, I would say. This is actually probably the best horror sequel ever made. If not, it's in my top 3 for sure. It's that good. Like I said, the mystery's so well done because you got these people screwing with Norman, trying to get him back in an asylum. They don't trust him. They don't want him to be free. And like I said, going from villain to sympathetic was such a odd but brilliant choice. And you get Meg Tilly, staying with him, being the niece of Marion Crane, the one he murdered in the first movie, and her mother, Marion's sister, trying to get back at Norman. But then slowly Meg Tilly's character starts to not really fall in love, but feel pity on Norman and doesn't want to screw with him no more. Realizes that he is a changed man and that they shouldn't be trying to make him back into a killer again. And all that is just so entertaining and intriguing. And the lady who came back as Marion's sister, the same actress too from the 1960 film, did an excellent job as well. Both her and Meg Tilly, phenomenal. And then when shit hits the fan, when we find out there's a third person in the house, that just adds another whole layer to it. And the kills they're doing are intense. They really update it into the 80s genre. Like I said, it's brutal. Great practical effects in here. We get a really cool knife kill that goes right through someone's mouth and out the back. It looks so brutal, and it's just dripping with mystery. You're like, who is this other person? My only nitpick with the movie is the final little scene where Mrs. Spool shows up and claims to be Norman's real mother and gives this whole backstory how she had mental problems. That's why Norman was taken from her and all that. And that takes away just the tiniest bit from the story itself, the overall story. And I don't like that direction. It is cool to see Norman hit her with the shovel and just treat her like his last mom, the corpse again. But aside from that little nitpick, this movie is phenomenal. Great cinematography. Dean Cundy was the DP, and you get those nice shots at night that are all blue sky. Love it. It's really an amazing, amazing movie. But coming in the first place, I had no other choice but to pick Hitchcock's classic Psycho from 1960. This movie does not even feel like it's from 1960. It was like a leap in cinema at the time. I feel like when I watch these older movies, they usually have not the best pacing and stuff like that. But this one just moves right along from start to finish. It actually feels like it could be split up into 3 movies and all of them be compelling and, really high quality. But it still feels focused at the same time, having all these different scenarios happening. Like the way it starts with Marion Crane, played by the brilliant Janet Leigh, and I think she does a phenomenal job. Stealing all this money and going on the run, and that's like could be a whole movie in itself. That's super interesting, and finding out if she's going to get caught by this cop who keeps following her, or all this stuff is so good. But then when she arrives at the Bates Motel, it's like it becomes a whole nother animal, with Norman seeming so innocent, and you think that his mother is this psycho killer at the house. But of course, the story unfolds and you learn more and more about Norman and find out his mother's actually dead. And you start to put the pieces together. And in the final act, it just goes bonkers with, Norman dressing up as his mom and you actually seeing it. And the doctor explaining that it's like a whole split personality at this point where part of him's the mother and part of him's Norman. But the mother usually takes over and he blacks out. And it's just so good, so well made. From Marion driving to the Bates Motel, you know, and just her thoughts, thinking of how scenarios are going to play out, like her boss coming in and looking for her, and the cops and everything playing out in her head. It's like that's actually what would happen in real life. It feels natural. It feels grounded in reality, I suppose. Leading up to her famous shower kill, one of the best scenes in all cinema, you know, with Norma coming in and doing all the stabbing. And that's where the black and white really comes into play. I feel like that elevates the film as well. It may have been put in black and white to save money, but I feel like it helps because it hides some of the effects. It, like the blood effects and stuff like that, look a lot better at this day and age in black and white. Just so good, man. The score. The score is fantastic. You know, it influenced movies like Friday the 13th. They paid tribute to it in Carrie, but the score really puts it in another league when it comes to 60s films as well. It feels like a more 80s, more 70s, 80s modern score with its frantic violin playing and such, and it just again elevates all the scenes in the film. And having Marion Crane go out 40 minutes into the movie is just that must have been mind-blowing. It's twist, that's for sure, because you expect her to be there right to the end. She's our main character, but no, she gets picked off, and then we follow her sister and private investigator and stuff like that. And it's just such a well-made script, well written. um, Hitchcock's direction and vision is brilliant, and of course Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates is perfect. I wouldn't change anything about his performance. Like I said, he comes off as innocent and kind of like a childlike innocence to him, and you feel bad for him because of his abusive mother. But deep down, when you find out that he's really the killer and he killed his mom as well, and it's just it's mind-blowing to me that he ended up coming up with this back in 1960. Just so brilliant. Even though I think this is based off a novel, but still, getting a novel to the screen is not an easy task, and I can't praise this movie enough. From its iconic score to its iconic kills. Another iconic kill is when he kills the private eye, and you get this great shot, overhead shot of Norman coming out, so you can't tell who it is. You just see it's a woman. You believe it's his mom. It's so believable. And he kills the private eye, and he goes down the stairs in this awesome shot after getting sliced in the face. And man, everything about this movie is perfect. It's a 10 out of 10 all day long. It influenced countless movies. It's considered the granddaddy of all slasher movies, even though it plays out much more like a psychological thriller that added a lot of elements of slasher that we come to see in future movies like Halloween. And it's just so well made. Perfect performances, perfect direction, perfect everything. And it easily comes in the first place in my ranking. So there you have it, guys. There's my ranking of all 5 Psycho movies. Hope you enjoyed it. I know a pretty dull ranking from the first movie to the last movie that came out in chronological order, but still, that's how I rank these movies, so I'm not going to change it just for the sake of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, leave your rankings down in the comments. You can follow me on Letterboxd and Instagram. Links to those in the description of this video. And until next time, guys, thanks for watching.